required training for all new hires from now on, because as you know, I know, Karan, from hearing from Ben, that, you know, you were frustrated that there was no training, and there really isn't. And I told Vinny when he started, you got to dig in and figure things out. That's how it goes here right now.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to use these as, like I said, a required training for all new hires. And this applies to everybody, no matter what area you work in. So, so I'm going to focus on the items that are most widely used, and just give overviews. Again, I know I've said this before, but just give overviews on the items that aren't as widely used, or maybe I have never used. There's several things that I have never used.
Right.
So that's, you know, and then I told Kevin I was already, and I will continue to present them in a way where it will help you from a sales perspective, right? As I said before,
Right.
you don't need to know the details. You just need to know, yes, it can do this, and then the details can be worked out later. Okay, so that being said, this week we are going to do AP info because it's very fast, and we're going to do the inventory info tab. So we're in the corporation record, and when a site is deployed, there's a check mark in all three of these categories here across the top. Now, the first thing I do is I remove this, because I worked in accounting, and I can tell you there is no one who wants to be able to create duplicate invoices. I am guessing that this configuration was put here because we probably had one customer who had a specific need for duplicate invoices to go through. So I always remove that check mark. Duplicate invoices mean duplicate payments, and bookkeepers get in trouble for that. So we want to avoid that issue. Now, in the invoicing module, you can assign a batch number, and then you can assign a voucher number. And for the record, that's voluntary. The default is to give it a batch number and a voucher number. And I think people get hung up a lot on, you know, well, the batches and the vouchers. So the best way to describe it is a voucher is an invoice. So when you're doing accounts payable, you get these invoices emailed to you, and then you get some in the mail, and you have other tasks that you're doing, and then you pile up all the invoices, you code them with GL account codes, and then they're in a stack, and you post them, right? Whether they're on your computer or in a physical stack on your desktop, you're posting them. So each invoice is a voucher. So if you have 15 invoices in your stack, then you're going to have 15 vouchers. You can post those in a batch so that you can keep everything in a nice, neat, and tidy categories, right? Because maybe you have customers who post invoices all day long, and they only want to do one batch and reconcile at the end of the day. They can do that. But maybe you have customers who say, no, every time I get a handful of invoices, I want it to be a separate batch number. So they're creating batch numbers all day, every day. That's fine. They can do it that way too. However they want to do it. They just have to be shown how to create a new batch. So, and here we can assign a last batch number and a last voucher number, but no one's ever changed this. We always leave it starting at 1. But if someone says to you, right, so from your perspective, if someone says to you, well, we don't post in batches, okay, it's not required. And what we would do is when they came to me and I did their business assessment, I would uncheck this. I haven't ever done that, just for the record, but so that you know when a customer says that, it's an option, it's configurable. Okay, you can also choose a bank code. You have to create the bank codes in the control file, but you can choose bank codes and 1099 codes that will get pushed over to your accounting software. And no one does this anymore. So just so you know that it's available, but no one uses it anymore. We don't even discuss it with customers when we set them up because it hasn't been used in probably about 15 years. So it's kind of new. And eventually it'll probably be used as a replacement. So when something else comes up that needs to be pushed, we might be using some of these two fields right here. All right, now down below on the left, you have the invoice bridge options. And customers have the option to choose how they want freight, tax, and distributed when it's pushed to their accounting software. So do they want it prorated over line? So for example, if the freight was $500 on the invoice, and there were 5 items on that invoice, do they want it prorated $100 towards each line item? You can break it down that way. And you have several different options. You can also distribute it to a specific account if you want to. And the same thing with the tax. So that's the same exact thing for both of those. Your distribution amount, you can do a net or you can do a gross. And here is where we choose any of their accounting systems. Okay, obviously the most popular is QuickBooks. The version is not really, as you pull in, let's say, so QuickBooks, you have the option between QuickBooks Online. Look, come on. Well, you have the option between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. And then, of course, if you're using the desktop version of QuickBooks, you have to have Web Connector. So not sure if you guys know that yet when you're talking to customers, if they're talking about it. The way they are implemented is different based on whether they have QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop. With QuickBooks Desktop, we push several data sets into ePMX from QuickBooks. And anytime they update those fields, so for example, the vendor, they have to update it in QuickBooks first and then push it into ePMX. It doesn't work that way with QuickBooks Online. Yeah, right. With QuickBooks Online, they have to export their reports, and then we import them into ePMX, and then they do a direct connection when they bridge. So, so that's a difference that's important to know with QuickBooks. And I don't know why it's doing this. Let me refresh here and see if it goes away. Wrong login. Let's go back to where we were. Okay, so any questions about that difference between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Web Connector?
Tammy, API is different than the Web Connector. Is that correct?
API is different. And
right.
We have never, so it's really great that you guys have that as a talking point, but we have never implemented anyone using the API yet. It was created for a one customer who was going to be a very large customer, never signed with us. So, so I'm not sure how that works, but, oh, actually I am. Let's talk about that for a minute. Hang on a second. I'm gonna find the screenshot that I have. Give me 1 second. Oh, my computer's freezing up here. Let's see, Bellwether, documentation, bridges, QuickBooks. Okay. So Thomas sent me this the other day when I was asking him a question. So if you want to take a screenshot of this.
Yeah, I have this Intacct document, yeah. Okay.
So we were talking, Thomas and I were talking about QuickBooks, but he said he modeled it after the API after QuickBooks. So this is the way data flows. We push it into ePMX first, and then the only way that it gets back into QuickBooks is through the invoice module. These look like the same fields. Yeah, these are the same fields. That's QuickBooks.
Right. Tammy, when I discussed this with Thomas, he said this is only a read-only API. So you can just take out data from ePMX and push it out and put it into QuickBooks or Sage Intacct. So
Mhm.
if prospects, let's say he says, is it a two-way integration? So is it safe to say no, it's just a one-way side integration?
So, like that's, I don't know that I would explain it that way. I think what I would say is there are key data sets that can be pushed into EPMX from your QuickBooks or your Intact in
Right.
your accounting software. And it's only those two.
Mm-hmm.
But the only way it's getting back into your accounting software is via the invoice module. So whatever fields are on the invoice entry screen, that's what's getting pushed.
Okay.
Okay. Except, and this is what Thomas and I were trying to figure out, except there's no project on here. And in help, it says, now I haven't tested this, but in help, it says that if there's a project pulled into the purchase order and an invoice is tied to that purchase order, then when it's bridged with QuickBooks, it will reference the purchase order and pull the project data into QuickBooks too. So that's a little confusing because that's not on here. See, there's only job code. There's nowhere on the screen about the project. So that is for QuickBooks only. I can't attest to that for anything else. So, so is it one way or two way? I don't know. Based on that explanation, I don't think I would tell them either way. I feel like they need to clarify exactly what it is and not limit it to one way or two way. Does that make sense?
Right. The other side of this query would be, Tammy, when a prospect tells me, let's say I'm using Bill.com or maybe MetaViewer, one of the payment softwares. So if I am receiving the invoice here, I'm also creating another invoice inside EPMX. And since I can't really push those invoices here into EPMX, it turns out to be more like a double entry for me. So I have to create a new invoice, which that ties into the PO, and then I push it out of EPMX, and then I have to match it inside my payment software. What would ideally be the way to tell him? Is there another workaround for this in which I can negate the double entry for him?
So I had a customer who was using Bill.com, and what they told me they intended to do was, number one, to match everything up and make sure that it was what it was supposed to be, because that was a big thing. A lot of times invoices come in and they don't match the POs. So they wanted to be able to do that. And so they were willing to generate the invoice in EPMX. And when they bridged the invoices, they used the CSV output file to match up with what was in Bill.com. So because I don't have a Bill.com account, I don't know how that would work. But that's what the customer told me. So they used the invoice module as a reconciliation, because the invoice module tells you an item's been ordered, an item's been approved, it's been it's been requested, approved, purchased, and physically received. And and then until that happens, it's not available in the invoice module. So if you're able to create the invoice, you've just confirmed that everything that was supposed to happen happened and matches up, or fixed anything that didn't match up, right? So so that is what was important to this customer that I worked with. Now, they didn't bridge it with their accounting software. They just matched everything up and then sent a report off to the AP team to match it up with what was in Bill.com.
Got it. Okay. But let's say it was QuickBooks and they're not using Bill.com. So in that scenario, we can seamlessly integrate with QuickBooks and the same process follows.
Yes, we would just do a bridge, and if it was QuickBooks Desktop, it would just get pushed. Well, if either one, it would just the invoices would just get pushed into QuickBooks.
Got it.
Now we also and Ben used to sell them a lot. Kathy doesn't really sell them much, and I don't know why. It could just be coincidence, but we also have, because it doesn't happen as much now, you might not be aware, but we can do custom bridges. So if they come to us and they have QuickBooks, then I think we charge them like I don't know, $1,000 to do the connection for them, right? If they have another accounting software, that's considered a custom bridge. So if they come to you and they say, well, I have Sage, okay, we can do an integration. That would be considered a custom bridge. Let me get you a quote for that. And then you would reach out to Kevin. Kevin would get whatever he does. I can tell you most of the bridges cost around $2,200.
Okay. Okay.
If we did it already, right, based on this list. So let me go back to the corporation file. So right here, AP system. Based on this list, we've done it for somebody before. That's why it's in here. Okay. If
Right.
it's not in here, you know, then it definitely requires, definitely requires that it be run by Kevin and Thomas, so that Thomas can say we can or we can't. And Thomas usually says, I estimate it'll take 12 hours at $225 an hour. And then, you know, we go from there. Kevin decides what he wants to charge.
Okay. So these are the ones that we have had a custom bridge with at some point in time.
Yeah, the ones that are in here now.
Okay.
Now, some of these I've never heard of, like Lawson. I don't know what that is. I haven't heard of that one. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that in the past 6 years, we haven't done it with that software.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Tammy, so in case we come across a scenario when we are talking with a prospect and they are using, say, an accounting software, which is not in this list of softwares that we have already worked with, and they inquire that, you know, we would require Bellwether to integrate with that. So do we commit anything to them, or should we get it cross-checked first if our software will be able to, you know, interact or integrate with them in the first place? Because, you know, I was of the impression that irrespective of the name, we can actually do some kind of an integration with all of them, like a CSV kind of integration with any software out there.
So what that means is, so that's not really an integration though, right? And that is just generating an output file for you to do whatever you want with whatever accounting software. So that is an option for some customers. What's it going to look like? I don't have one on hand right now, but what I would suggest you guys do is you run a couple of tests and you leave it at none right here, AP version none. Just leave the standards here and then do a couple of invoices and a bridge and get an output file that you can show customers what the generic looks like. This is what you'll get.
Okay.
Okay.
So that is an option, yes. But not everybody wants that option. Some people are like, I don't want to manipulate the software. Well, I can tell you that in most cases, except for QuickBooks and maybe Intact with that new API that we have, that's what your output file, that's what your bridge is. It gives you an output file. So this basic standard format, if it's acceptable, doesn't require a custom bridge. But if they say, well, we need it to have this and that and this and that, and it has to be in this specific order, and the column headers have to look like this, then that's a custom bridge. And what you could say would be, oh, I understand. We've done several custom bridges in the past for many different customers. Let me see what would be involved. Can you send me the exact data? And what I do is I map it out. And when you have one for the first time, we'll get on a call and we'll map it out together. I'll show you what I do. Okay. What I do is I map it out for development so that it's very clear. I send it to the customer. in this document, and I ask them to approve it because we're getting a quote for custom work, so they have to sign off on it. And once I have that, then I submit it to Thomas directly because I work directly with Thomas. But if you guys are going to be doing this, I would probably create a ticket and copy everybody on it so that you could see, you know, the progress and see the details. I don't know if you guys have, you don't have a Zendesk account, do you?
Nope.
No, I don't have it.
So, okay. Okay, well then I think we'll just have to stick to it, you know. If you have a prospect that default output file isn't good enough and they want some specific details, then let me know and I will help you map it out and I'll get a quotation from Thomas. That's what we've been doing all along anyway.
All right.
Okay.
Tammy, one last quick question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just one elementary question. Let's say the prospect tells me I'm using QuickBooks. I receive the invoice. I need to make a change in the invoice. That change is not going to reflect in EPMX. Firstly, is that correct? He's going to have to manually make that change in EPMX.
Yeah. Once the data is bridged into QuickBooks, you can't change anything. The only thing you can do is add payment information in the invoice. But that's it. It's done. You can't change anything. That's your. Think of it in terms of, and I don't know if you guys ever worked in accounting, but in accounting, everything closes at the end of the month, the quarter, or the year.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that as your close. When you bridge it, everything's closed.
Okay.
Everything you bridged is closed. Okay.
Makes
All
sense.
right.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's typically a very big pain point for these guys because they're like, we don't want to then again get out of this software, go to that software, make a new invoice, or if we can't modify the invoice, and then again match it. So it becomes, they start complaining that it just increases my effort. But then it is what it is. So I just wanted to confirm that this is how it happens.
If you're talking to accounting people, and this helps me a lot, Karan, because I have that accounting background. If you're talking to accounting people, the word control is big to them. Control. It's a control issue. It's an auditing issue. You don't want people to be able to go back and change things once you've closed it, right? So those two words are how I relate to the accounting people. And they're like, oh yeah, yep, that makes sense. And then it's not an issue anymore, right? So you just literally overcame an objection by telling them their own job, right? Kind of.
Yeah. It makes more sense to them. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. All right. So anything else before I move on?
Nope.
Okay. So in EPMX, there's 3 areas where we can do approvals: requisitions, purchasing, and invoicing. And down here, this next dialog box is where we would set the invoice approvals. Now, I don't like invoice approvals, so I wouldn't sell this. I wouldn't oversell it, because here's how invoice approvals work. Okay, let's say Tammy is the AP girl and she enters the invoices, but the invoice is coming in for a purchase order that Karan approved.
Right. Yes.
So somebody created a PO, Karan approved it, and then placed the order, and now Tammy has the invoice. Well, guess where the approval is going to go? It's going to go to whoever is defined in Tammy's employee file, not Karan. It's not going to go back to Karan, because Karan might be like the engineering manager and somebody else is the accounting manager. So for Tammy, anything she does needs to be approved by her accounting manager. So there's no flexibility there whatsoever, none. So when you turn on invoice approvals, you can choose minimum hierarchy, entire hierarchy, or approver with proper dollar limit, but you can't choose the approver. It's going to go to whoever is in that user's employee file.
Okay.
Okay. So how do you get around that? I've had some people really mad because then told them, yes, we can turn on approvals. They didn't ask the detailed questions that they really needed answers to. And when they got to me and they realized that it wasn't flexible, they were pissed off.
Right.
So, so just keep that in mind when you're explaining it to people. Come up with a way where you're not misleading them, but you're not giving away too much information that isn't necessary.
Right.
Okay. So, anyway, and then there, of course, there's different ways to approve invoices, and there's 3 options. So it could be all purchase order related invoices, or it could be approval required for a modified total in purchase order. So in other words, if you pull in the PO to the invoice screen and you change the price and it doesn't match, it doesn't match what is in the PO, only those things will be approved, okay? And then you can turn on approvals for ad hoc invoices only. So anything that's not tied to a PO, which I don't know why people would want to do that. That makes no sense to me, because I would just go directly to my accounting software and enter ad hoc in my accounting software. But I have been on the phone with, like, who was it we were doing the OCR for? Lexington Health. And every single phone call, it was such a big deal to them to not have to enter an ad hoc invoice into their AP system that they wanted it in here. And then you'll have others who won't want it in here. So just know that you can do it either way. And then, of course, down below, we're going to define who gets notified when invoices are approved. That's what this section is right here. I'm going to move up here. Now, for your accounting software, you can designate, I haven't ever used this field, but you can designate specific GL account codes for every bridge that you do. That is not what most people want. Most people want the GL account codes that are in the PO. So, but just be aware, if they say, well, everything goes to our accounts payable account, okay, fine, we can define that way for you if you want us to. Right? And the same with freight. We can have freight, every single freight line item go to a particular GL account code or a tax account. So this one, maybe they could use for use tax, but I haven't had anyone do it yet. I found other ways for them to track use tax. Use tax is when you're a business and you buy items that you should have paid sales tax on, but the vendor didn't charge you sales tax, you now owe them use tax. Same thing. You just have to send the government your money.
Okay. Vendor is just a medium. Okay.
Yeah, you still have to send it to them. So, so companies call that use tax. And what I tell them to do is I tell them to create a line item on the purchase order for use tax, if that's what they want to do. Or they can pull it into every invoice if that's what they want to do. There's several different ways you can do it, but I haven't used this for the past 5.5 years, but it's available. Now, with budgets, you have a couple of different ways where you can have, I was looking for the setting this morning and I got distracted and I didn't get to find it, but somewhere in here, there's a place to select when you want the budget to be applied. Do you want it to be applied when the PO is created or when the invoice is created? So if you're turning on budget control in invoices, you probably have it set to adjust at the point of the invoice and not the PO, in which case we want to turn budgeting on, and we can set no control, a warning, or an error. But if we want it to be displayed, we have to put a check mark here in the invoice module. All right, any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay. So down at the bottom, you know, this is a talking point. I'll be honest with you, this is a talking point. Price variance. People like it, but they never actually apply it. So when I used to do accounts payable, I used to be able to everything was manual. I was still posting it into an accounting software, but I had physical invoices in my hand. And if I looked at that invoice and it was submitted with a paper purchase order, and the paper purchase order had $50 on it, but the invoice had $25, I couldn't post it because $25 is more than 5% variance on the invoice. So I had to send it back to the manager and have them approve it or fix it. Maybe they had to call the vendor and tell the vendor to send us a new invoice. But so my point is that you can set those thresholds here, right here in this price variance. So if someone, and I've been on several calls where they do this, they're thinking, I can tell they're thinking about how this is going to work. Well, what if the invoice doesn't match? Well, you can set variances. You can set, say, a 10% threshold where right here, unit price, 10% higher or 10% lower, you can't post it. EPMX won't allow you without it being approved. So that gives the AP person a little bit of flexibility for invoices that have discrepancies with the PO in the dollar amount. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So people love thinking about this and talking about it. I think it's really cool, but I haven't implemented it with anybody yet because they haven't wanted to. Once they get into it and they start using it, they want to use it the way it is. But it's available. We can set thresholds. 10% above or 10% below can't be posted. It has to be addressed. So this field right here gives you the ability to create additional fields on the invoice. Let's go to invoice entry. Pretend I'm creating an invoice. And do you see down here where it says user-defined fields?
Mm-hmm.
All of these fields, you can just user-defined. Let's say I want contract number. And every invoice that comes in, the AP girl has to type in the contract number, and we want that bridged. This is where we define it. This is where we define those fields. AP info, additional AP info, right here. Okay.
So Tammy, for this, we cannot add project codes. I mean, as a user-defined field.
I see what you're trying to do, but if you think about software and how tables are connected, if we could do that, and they could put a project in here, but it wouldn't be tied to project in EPMX because there's no connection in the tables to those two data sets. Okay, so could we, if they say, but I need project, okay, fine. Let's create a header, and then you can define your own projects and just manually type it in each time you create an invoice.
Right.
But we can't pull it in like we do to a PO or a requisition.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, so really, that's it for AP info. Let's save it without that there. Fix that. You can come in here and you can reset it. You know, if your counter gets off, you can reset your counter. So I think because I guess I wasn't anticipating, you know, and I should have probably all the questions about invoicing because that is a big thing. It comes up a lot. I didn't think we were going to take that long on this tab. So I think we'll leave it at that for today. So if you have any questions about invoicing, have at it that we haven't covered.
No, I guess good for now.
Okay.
No, I think that invoice approval clarity was very important, Tammy, because we do talk a lot of, there are a lot of folks who are actually just from the AP side, and they're very interested more on the payment side rather than just the purchasing side. I mean, that's a part of it, but they're also very keen to understand what we can do on the payment side. So yeah, I mean, we used to park it by saying that you can have approvals on the invoices, But really, again, there is, like you said, there's no flexibility. It's really not going to go back to the same person. It's just going to follow a list.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, and the person putting in the invoice isn't probably 99% of the time isn't the person that, in that employee's file that needs to approve that particular variance.
The approver's
So,
not going to do it. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm hoping that changes one day. So if you get feedback, share it with me so that I can track it and constantly ask Thomas back. He loves it when I pester him.
Right.
Maybe we can add it to our requested enhancement list. So, okay, well then I will let you all go, and after our call, I will go ahead and send out a new meeting invite
Sure.
for 9:30 on Mondays for the next 6 weeks.
That's
Perfect.
great.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thank
Have
you.
a
Thank you
great
so much,
weekend.
Tammy.
You too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.